Hey guys, real quick before you jump into the episode, fair warning, this is a really rough one. The internet just absolutely was not cooperating this day. So my brother did his best editing it. It is rough. It is going to be frustrating, but I think you can still basically follow it. So I hope that you will be patient and try to follow what's going on in the episode despite the difficulties. I just couldn't bear to throw out the audio because Mr. Craig Douglas was so generous with his time and the content was so good. So I hope you'll stick it out, but I understand if you won't. Thanks. Welcome to the Combat Learning Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Peacock. My guest today is Craig Douglas, an interdisciplinary defensive training instructor operating globally under the ShivWorks brand, specializing in meshing together wrestling-based combatives with close-quarter shooting. In this episode, Craig unpacks what it means to take an andragogical approach to teaching coursework and why it's a more effective way to help students learn, especially adult students. He also explains why he believes instructors actually coach their students too much, a phenomenon born out of traditional pedagogy that is not optimal for an andragogical approach. This episode might just turn your concept of good instruction upside down. So if you're excited to jump in, hit the subscribe button on your podcatcher now. So welcome to Combat Learning Podcast.
Awesome, man. Good to be here. Glad to be on Combat Learning Podcast. Thanks for having me.
Oh man, the pleasure is mine. I'm totally honored to have you on. I've been a lurker for a long time. Been following your content for a couple of years, and very, very, very impressed with your work. I always refer to it when I get into arguments about self-defense.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. I've been at it for a while. I'm not sure I should be the standard to be upheld to, but I'll put my number in the hat for 10 years certainly at this. I have been at this all times.
Yeah, for sure. And it I appreciate the amount of thought that you put into it. You don't just teach the techniques, but you have naming conventions and taxonomies, and you're very organized and polished in the way that you communicate your teachings.
I sure try to, man. And I think we're all victims of our experience, but I've found that the teaching part and the curriculum development part, and as you described very, very accurately, the taxonomies, that's as important as we're doing, the actual content, the text, the strategies. I think it's a big reason that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is so difficult to really, I think, code on how to teach something correctly. And that's why you see so many guys from his squad getting their black belts or wrecking black belts in competition with them 4 or 5 years. So I think it has everything to do with the way he's teaching.
Absolutely. Teaching makes a huge difference. So today, well, before I jump right into the topic, I know that I'm going to have a lot of listeners that have probably never heard of you. So if you could take a second to introduce yourself a little more in depth and kind of talk about your experience and what led you to where you are now in terms of how you teach.
Yeah. Thumbnail, absolutely. So my name is Craig Douglas, the founder of a training and products company called ShivWorks. It is my second career. My first career was as a police officer, where I did 21 years, and I had most of my career was spent as a drug enforcement officer, a SWAT officer, both simultaneously, 11 years out of uniform. I was a soldier in the Army, 80s Air Army, no combat, no deployments or anything like that prior to that. And I've been a martial artist since I was a kid, and have probably done most every training at the time garage that that kind of brought me to where I'm at now. So I'm a full-time now. I teach in 40 states, 11 countries outside of the U.S., 3 branches of the U.S. military, 5 federal agencies, and I have a small standing recurring contract within a small segment of the intelligence community. I stay on the road 40 to 42, maybe 43 weeks out of the year, and I specialize in the integration of weapons, specifically modern weapons like firearms and small knives, within an extreme close range, grappling even context, more grounded. And I'm known for doing that in particularly novel environments like vehicle to buying experience, buying drugs and guns and people and so. So that's me. It's my experience and my training, and I stay busy.
Yeah, for sure. That's crazy, man. Staying on the road, having contracts. I'm sure there's a lot of reality-based self-defense guys that would covet the ability to have all those contracts and be running around so often, training people.
That's another thing about tenure, man. I mean, I'm 52, and I think now a lot of people are looking at me like, "Wow, where'd you come from?" And it's like, well, the place I've been for the past 30 years, I've been around. I think enough, and I've taught enough, and the community that you have enough people that have trained with. They go back and filter into their units. I didn't start off mil gov and other work. I had in the very beginning a lot of people from those communities into open enrollment training, and that's what led to me eventually kind of filtering in. And I'm probably split evenly 50 between open enrollment coursework and closed coursework. And, it keeps me involved and engaged, because with the open enrollment, a lot of times they don't have a pressing need, the kind of training that I'm offering, but they're incredible volunteer that really wants to be there and is just, super engaged and super interested, versus a lot of more professional who they need this content. There's no doubt, but their interest level is no more than a construction worker has in his hammer when he gets off at 5. So it's both. And
yeah. So you've said before that you actually take an andragogical approach to how you teach your coursework, which is it's a term I'm familiar with from my studies in grad school, but I've never really heard anyone say in relationship to martial arts. So I'm wondering, like, for you, what does it mean to actually take an andragogical approach to training?
Well, and unlike you, I don't have grad. What I had are people way smarter than me who've come into the coursework and said, "You're doing a really good job of this. How did you learn how to drive training with an andragogical approach?" And my you're doing works, and I look at doing some reading research on it and being taught a bit about it actually by Jesuit professor at the Jesuit University. I kind of steer towards andragogy as specified by Malcolm Knowles, and he just makes the distinction between adult learning and child learning. So some things I agree with, some things I don't, but the needing to know the reason, what the business that Knowles says makes drives adults. You can't, and if you compare how martial arts are historically taught, we never questioned our senseis or our professors or our gurus about, well, why are we doing this?
Yeah.
So I think that's probably the first big distinction in applying androgy to martial arts is it really busts up the traditional way of teaching where, you sat quietly, usually in some kind of folded leg, uncomfortable position and listened or watched your guru or walking from a little, while you kind of fumbled through practice, and that's how a lot in martial arts, the Japanese systems and Okinawan systems. That's how a lot of those are trained. Late in the late '60s, the '70s, and things like that. And so it kind of sort of figured out on your own without effort put forth to guide the process by the instructor. So that need to know the idea that adults learn experientially. Now, that Knowles talks about, I don't agree with, such as adults were, an internal versus an external motivator. I think that's true to an extent, but I think significant external motivation can properly motivate you internally. And that's part of what I do in ECQC is facilitate an experience so that, you develop the internal. I bring you to a point in ECQC where you figure out what you want to do with this experience, and you're going to ask yourself, okay, this happened to I like how I feel about it. Okay with it? Am I not? If not, what do I want to do about it? Do I want to ignore it? Do I want to, this is a one of a black swan event that stick my head in the sand, or do I want to actually get better? And more often than not, I've been able to apply. I didn't have any direction on this. I had a thing because I'm a fairly empathetic person, I'm very observant about people, which is why I was a good undercover officer. I was able to watch what effect, my laboratory was having. And that really went a long way towards honing people and honing my method as far as how I teach people and make that internal change. I didn't understanding how important this was. I do now, as I'm, cruising through middle age. But yeah, that's a big part of it, man, is that. So me facilitating a process that provides enough external motivation, I would say, to create or your internal processor. So I probably produced more BJJ black belts as a quote unquote firearms instructor than any other guy in the industry. And I've got quite a few that started their BJJ with ECQC and what happened in ECQC.
Yeah. I heard that. That's really awesome to hear.
Yeah. So it's been cool, man. I love what I do, and people that come and train with me, and they have given beyond the cards I was. So I'm very thankful for them.
Awesome. Okay, so you've also talked about a focus on decision making during your training. Like, how do you try to make sure that the exercises or the evolutions that you put together are helping your patrons, as you like to call them, make the correct decisions that they would need to make it, like if they actually came into a situation where they'd have to use the skills?
So, I have a bunch of different training modalities within ECQC, and some of sparring and some like happen, and it's going to start and go, and you're trying to do this, he's trying to do that. There are a couple of modalities, but there's one where we put together all the content, and this is Sunday. It's a full spectrum evolution. Do this in other coursework with most notably enhancing a dominance paradigm, which is April, but and drive an illusion where the students are going against each other, and I don't have a role with ambiguity. And I tell them, here's what I'm going to do. We're going to start off with this person approaching you. You as the role player, if you're approaching the person who's the lawful CCW guy, you can do anything you want. Okay, you can. I want you to start off with some kind of verbal interaction. If a person doesn't have a fence, they don't have hands up close, in a non-threatening way, and you think to yourself, I could probably punch that guy in the face and get away with it. I want you to act on that impulse. I want you to make this authentic emotionally based on how you feel in the moment. And when we start doing stuff like that, and usually it's even better if there's some alumni class, because they can model for the vast majority of class who hasn't done this before. But once they start looking at role play, having fun, they get into the spirit of it, and particularly ambiguity, that's what drives decision making. And we talk about it in the aftermath. And here's the other thing too: everybody watches everybody else. So we have the class forms, what I like to think of as a Thunderdome, which is okay, 3 guys from the class, usually 20 guys. We put them in the middle, and we have them role play this through, and it's over when I call it. So, I may call that evolution, that full spectrum, about a gun being drawn, or if somebody says something that's really, really adroit verbally, such as, the approaching role player walks up with a script in his mind of this guy just, cut him off in traffic. And he runs up to the guy and he says, "You motherfucker, you just cut me off in traffic." and the guy with gun puts his hands up and he says, "Hey, I'm not attentive. I'm trying to get to the hospital. My kid's there. I'm so sorry. Do you want to call police?" And it's so perfect because the guy that happens to be a parent too, and it takes the wind out of the sails, and it completely makes his anger back. And it's observable, and you can feel stuff like this, right? And the party that's watching can feel stuff like this. So it's super cool to watch. It's super cool to observe. A lot of times, I'll call the evolution right then, and I can feel from experience, because I've done this so much, when it starts to go flat and when it needs to be called, and okay, that's where that needed to go. So that's how, and then the very next one with the same 3 guys, because we'll rotate roles. We're okay, and then the other guy, the third guy, is the guy holding back the other guy. That one may go and start off with a punch or a rock, or where the person with the gun overreacts or says something inappropriately, and he basically, because of his poor, started with a guy. This, I give them feedback and criticism. That, hey man, your problem is not your physicality or your ground game or your ability to get your gun out. Your problem is that you are a tech nerd and you work in a cube farm and you're socially illiterate. And if you don't learn how to talk to people, you may very well end up in a gunfight. That guy, his work after he leaves may be, you know what? Maybe I need to go join practice speaking with and around other people because I'm in a cube farm. So it's stuff like that. I teach decision making, and again, and I use the word loosely. I facilitate decision making, and I facilitate them learning how to do that experientially through the evolutions. And guys, but so being in the middle, and you get to see how everybody else does and what works and what doesn't and what people do. I'm a tactician, and I've been quoted some of my guys to have the firearm skills of a USPSA Grandmaster, the empty hand skills of an MMA fighter, ability of a stand-up comic. They because I think problem-solving abilities, a well-placed word, a hip escape, and a trigger press are all that as tacticians that we should have parity in all those problem areas.
Yeah, that's an excellent model to strive towards. I think it's often neglected, especially in the reality-based self-defense kind of a sphere sort of world, that they pay lip service to verbal de-escalation, but it's a lot of, hey, if somebody puts their hands on you, just throw them down and re-stomp the groin and stomp their neck and run away. Like, it's like they don't actually practice an ability to diffuse a situation or navigate?
No. You see that roughly, somewhat, well, actually better out. You do see it now in the law enforcement community. Historically, you saw it through attempts like verbal judo, but in the reality-based self-defense community, what's always interesting to me, and I'll give some constructive criticism to the British that years. That model, which defined a lot of word combatives and reality-based. Once your hands came up in a fence, it moved into your fence. He just got dumped. He got trashed, and Brit. So there's semblance of color of authority, and they would dump guys out. Now I think good doormen like Dennis Martin and people like that would definitely pluck their way out of things and talk patrons out of doing things, but a training modality for that came through the reality-based community or the combatives community or the historical model, not so much.
Yeah.
And I shouldn't really just credit. And you could say it's probably unfair of me to say it's bad with the American community. We didn't do any better at talking our way out of things. And I found more often than as an undercover officer, when I was in an initiative deficit, if I was trying to, buy drugs and guns, a lot of times I had to talk my way out of things. And there was no action chin jab your way out of three dudes, who are guns.
No kidding.
I'm trying to. There's that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. That's
so I have that distinction that have been a victim that much of robbery that's actually teaching right now.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a really precarious situation to be in. And you can't just be like, yeah, I'm going to do a 360 kick, 1, 2, 3, like I've seen in some videos before out of the reality. Sometimes it's weird. I see stuff from Taekwondo class and reality-based self-defense classes, and I just wonder what's going on. But
I know. I agree. It's weird. And in my attempts at talking my way out, you can see in muck, which is a wrong time format. But I'm really a fan of guys' path of training like this, and certainly, guys that, and I've got guys that have been training with me since the very beginning, since the first class I did in 2003 for open enrollment, and guys that, become a once a year patron, lifestyle people. Man, their verbal agility and what they've done to develop their verbal agility it's really profound. Really good at not only talking their way out of things, but using language and using verbal agility to set up kinetic action. So the guys who ironically, the guys who are the best at talking their way out of things are also the guys who are the best at talking their way into things, as drawing a gun or sucker punching someone or picking a bar. Good verbal agility.
Absolutely. You mentioned before that you use like teaching or facilitate, rather. You use that loosely. How do you feel like instruction is very detailed, martial arts is very detailed, and instructors tend to give lots and lots and lots of feedback. So how do you feel about coaching in the combatives and combat sports space, and what do you do? Well, that's a little bit leading. I'll just leave it at that question.
Hey, sorry to interrupt you right in the middle of the podcast, but I promise it'll only take a second. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the Combat Learning email newsletter at combatlearning.com/newsletter. Not only will you never miss an episode of the Combat Learning Podcast, you'll get exclusive tips and resources straight to your inbox. And I'm giving away my ebook, An Introduction to Motor Learning for Martial Artists, so you can get up to speed on the central topics of this podcast. But that's not even it. I'll also invite you to our private Facebook discussion group so you can ask any questions you want or discuss any topic related to teaching and learning martial arts. And all of this is 100% free. So go to combatlearning.com/newsletter right now to subscribe and claim all this cool stuff for yourself. That's combatlearning.com/newsletter.
Well, I mean, the first thing is, are we skills or are we teaching tactics? That I think that's if we're teaching motor skills, certainly there has to be some pedagogy and some instruction. But I'm a big fan of the less is more idea, and motor skill, especially teaching adults motor skills. Pretty much, the bottom line: the more they're getting, the more we're encouraging. That's how they need. They need. I think, and you watch this all the time, where you see endless detail. And for Danaher again, Danaher made a remark in an IG post a couple of years ago, maybe, where he found the impulse to overcoach and give people so. And that to remind myself and also to let the students know certain things. When I have people broken into drill, and let's say they're doing something like pummeling for underhooks, and we're doing that and no resistance, I will say it's okay with 3 partner switches. That, okay, guys, that's good enough to move forward and add some pressure. So let's do black. And understanding based on the time I have what's good enough, and what needs to be better, and what needs to be explained with words, which is sucking up time. I think that's the difference in experience. That okay, well, somebody has been doing this for 20 years. Experience and mindfulness, not just, but you don't learn that unless you have a ton of repetition and observational. I think that's a big right there, man, is knowing when to shut things, and AI assistance for mentorship that I try and emphasize with guys is developing a sense of when to shut up. It's not about more words, it's about the right words. And we should always drive our presentations, particularly our verbal part, with breath. We should be concerned. We should drive it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I have the same sense that there's a lot of overcoaching in the community, like what I've from delving into both like on the classroom end and on the motor learning end is what I've found is that coaching is more actually the verbal aspect of coaching is actually more about optimizing what people are doing and directing their attention than trying to give them detailed instructions, play by play, like every beat of what they're trying to do. Like as I've been frustrated in the past.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'll tell get them to here. Okay. You can, there are optimal ways to get from A to B, but remember, it's about B. Make sure they understand that, escape and jiu-jitsu, I tell people what they're trying to accomplish. And we talk about what it is, why they need it, what they're trying to accomplish, face them, make space, make a friend. And when they're trying to apply this with pressure, those become the things that we say after the formal pedagogical introduction and explanation of the hip escape. So when I'm walking around and I've got pairs of people in the dirt or wherever trying to learn a hip escape, facing, make space more. They'll just roll on your side, make space, frame. So, that they hear that over and over and over, but at the same time, they're not focused on what I'm saying. It's a guiding word or two, right? 2, 3 at the most. that I can say to facilitate that motion that they're in. And they understand where they're trying to go. And I was in the middle of evolution, some guys who, got a fist helmet wedged in their mouth and getting a T-gun torn out of their hand. They know they're going to get shot with it. Don't just get on your side. On your side. I don't care how they do it. I can't give them, lift your knee, do that. Get on your side. Get on your side. Every now and then I may offer detail. Get your elbow in. Get your elbow in on your side. Get on your side. I don't care how you do it. So yeah, I agree with you, Josh. I think there's a ton over coaching, and it's well intentioned. It is. Sure. It's well intentioned, but that goes back to the observation and mindfulness nature of people that are teaching. I mean, do you just go in there and say the same shit, or do you go in there and actually are you mindful of the effect that your words have? Do you think to yourself afterwards, why can't I get to do X with what I'm saying? Maybe I need to change words.
Yeah. And a lot of it's just the person.
Presentation from 15 years. Yeah. I think my presentation is cleaner and more concise and better than it was 15 years ago. When they don't change their language. They don't evolve their language. They don't.
Right. Awesome. So you've said before in a few videos that the burnt hand learns best, or something to the effect of that. And I was wondering what that means with combatives and combat sports training.
I think taking people to failure is important, and this also separates me from people in the reality-based community, not really the reality-based self-defense community, but some pretty notable people who have written books and produced products who hate me and hate what I do. Is they are the mindset that you should never let a student lose. You should never do that. Ever, 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 ever. Which is trying, in academies and federal agents, lead training with the mindset that they didn't absolutely want to crush it. There are people, and here's now we see a lot in who are doing women's self-defense training. Yeah, and I'm sure you've probably seen a lot of the Bullet Man stuff, that's done by people where it's a short course of instruction, like 4 hours. You got this guy that dresses up in this pad. Woman comes out and after minimal try, she has no athleticism. She throws this fair, observably in, and we bogus reaction by the guy in a suit, and this dude in like a Cobra Kai gi runs out and grabs the chick and says, "You're a tiger. You're ready for the streets," and something like that. And we all know that that's false. And that's the problem with that. She may not admit it. She may pay lip service. She may have had fun. She may have paid that I didn't have before. But all those gals that do that, they know it's bullshit. They know it's bullshit. They know they've been lied to, and they know their training is dishonest. And I think the worst thing you can do with a patron who trusts you to teach themselves is be dishonest.
Absolutely.
So
I totally
agree with that. When I facilitate an experience, it's not a real fight, but it is an honest experience. And what happened to you is what happened to you. And I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Your problem may not be, a gun. It may be between the physical condition that you're in right now and the idea of how to move around on the ground, much less execute. It's a death sentence. Get knocked over in a fight in any kind of event. That is a death sentence, a potential death sentence for you. That's the reality. That's what we that 2 or 3 times within 24 hours of training in a 2.5-day week. That's where you're at. And you decide what to do with it. More often than not, that person has a positive reaction. They don't like it, but they have a positive reaction, and I see them a year later and they're like, Craig, I'm back for round 2. And I'm like, have we met before? Yeah, it's Dan. Dan from here, Connecticut. Yeah. Holy shit, dude. That's happened a lot. And I don't know, got 50 or 30 or in 18 years. I did my with that is that the burnt hand most assuredly does teach best. And and I've got a lot of jobs as far as being a teacher. One of my jobs is in a controlled way for you to experience chaos and for you to feel the wheels coming off and to have a supportive community of people who've all experienced the same thing and are there and understand, hey man, this is not pretty and nobody wears a cape. This is hard work. Anybody can have their shit pushed in. Anybody can have their ass handed to them by anybody else on a given day. And that is the truth, which hammers home the first 3 or 4 hours that we spend together in learning verbal, phonetic, and shit.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've become, whether you like it or not, you've become something of a thought leader in the combatives / self-defense community. And I know I have friends that are real big fans of yours too. And I was wondering what you thought of with people who teach self-defense adopting some of your methods that seem to be kind of commonalities with your teachings.
Sure. I'm glad to see guys investigating it, and I feel, I hope I've been a positive influence on people, and they, are benefiting from. I've got an I've given paper to, let's see, 5 people. I've actually given paper to 5 people, 2 in England and 3 here in the U.S. And I'm probably going to give some paper as far as instructor stuff. And I feel funny about it because I've always been funny about like monetizing the instructor thing and the whole classic martial arts deal of paying for belts or certificates. And I just don't, it rubs me the wrong way. But at the same time, and here's the other problem I have too, is just the idea that, hey, if I feel like if I give a guy a piece of paper, essentially I'm saying it is a peer and he could probably teach his content as well, exactly the same way, but he can teach it as well as I can, because if I'm giving him a piece of paper, then he has not become a clone of me. What he's done is he's taken my ideas and made himself the best that he's been. Driven by a lot of my ideas and tactics and things like that. He may use different words than me, but he's doing the same stuff. He may even use better words than me, but doing the same stuff. So I've always thought, if that's true, who am I to give this guy a piece of paper? And there's some hubris on my part by doing so. Mm-hmm. So I with it. Should I be giving it? I don't know. I'm probably going to do it. And the way I justify it is the paper that I give people represents a statement from me at a particular point in my life on a particular day about how I feel about them and their abilities. And I just want it recorded. And specifically in all, they all the quote unquote certification person, but they all say, there's no requirement of the bearer of this certificate to myself. There's not. So That's it. So in that regard, it's almost like a Menkyo Kaiden from classical the the Japanese. And as far as how I feel about people adopting my stuff, I'd like people with me before they try and use my ideas. You can be a smart guy and be inspired by me. I mean, I'm okay with it, man. I'm so there are couple.
Yeah.
I know who's out there and stuff, and who's doing it well, and who's not doing it with permission and not doing it well. So there are all kinds of strata there. But the answer, I'm 92% okay with it. If I
Okay. 92%.
I'm 92% okay with it. Yeah, man, I am. I mean, because, and here's the bottom line, man. It's not like I'm worried about anybody taking anything out of my pocket. That's not what it's about. But if I hear somebody say managing unknown contacts, would I like them to reference me? I'm interested in my curriculum. Paper. Hey man, if this isn't your language or ID, write the source, talk about how it relates to what you are doing. It's super simple. I teach you. I will say, okay, we and the third is your hands. What we want our hands high and compressed, and the language we'll use to describe this idea is we'll use the word offense to describe this idea of the hands being high and compressed. That word, as it relates to this idea, was originally coined by Jeff Thompson, GOFF This is his language to describe this idea. It's a very resonating language. Everybody uses it, so it's really important for me to cite where this came from. And then I move on. Now, how I use offense is not how Jeff uses offense at all. I mean, there's some rough similarities, but I don't really use offense as an antenna to set up a I don't stagger my hands. I mainly use offense to get into the default position so you can cover your head quicker. So I use it, strategically and tactically different than Jeff does,
Right.
But the language is just so, and because it's so apropos, and there's not a better way to say that, then that has become, the lexicon that everyone uses, but how many people know where it came from, that Jeff is the guy that coined that language. So I think the language and history of where it came from. As a teacher, I do that, and it would be my preference if people did the same with my content.
Yeah, I gotcha. Totally understand that. That's and I think that's reasonable. That's definitely reasonable. Guys, thank you so much for listening. If you have any feedback, you can email me at josh@combatlearning.com or send me a message on facebook.com/combatlearning. Now, real quick before I go, can I ask you a huge favor? If you got value from this episode, leave us a review on iTunes, Google Podcasts, or whatever your favorite podcasting platform is. So many shows pop up and fizzle out. And we're talking about stuff that nobody else is talking about, and we want to stick around. So leaving us a review helps us a ton. Finally, the show is produced by Micah Peacock. Thanks in advance, and I'll see you on the next episode.